put the place up.
Welcome to Your Next Chapter, a podcast diving into storytelling's impact on innovation. I'm Jeremiah Tittle, CEO of Next Chapter Podcast, your host for conversations with creative minds reshaping their worlds through narrative. And our guest for this episode is Jared Angaza. Jared is the chief strategist for the Human Space Program, a nonprofit devoted to conscious space migration. He's had a long career spanning the world, helping nonprofits, influencers, and future makers position their brands and craft their communication strategies. Jared, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, man.
Absolutely. So you're a citizen of the world.
Yeah.
And it seems we have some common places or places in common in terms of areas you touch and travel to. So I'm excited let's start there in terms of the international life that you lead. As someone who's lived around the world from San Diego, where you currently are, to Kenya, what has cultural immersion taught you about communicating a message?
I appreciate that question. Culture it plays a very big role in my world. I talk a lot about culture, and as a brand architect, I'm often helping someone else create their culture within their organization or be more intentional about it. That comes from my experience of recognizing how much culture in Nairobi specifically, I'd probably zero in there. I lived in Rwanda for 5 years, in Kenya for 5 years, in multiple different places in all over Congo and Tanzania and whatnot. But in Nairobi, it was more of a melting pot, and in Rwanda, I was very rural in the sticks with like one tribe. In Kenya, I was all over the place, and I got to experience. I had lived in a home that seemed to be the congregation spot for everybody coming through town. And I had a guy, an Iranian guy that lived on one wing of the house, and an Israeli that lived on the other wing of the house, as you can imagine. That created some interesting conversations. And, and my kids are growing up in that, and I've got an adopted son from Rwanda, and he's growing up in that. And we just had this melting pot of different cultures. It really gave me this great appreciation for how much a person is sort of a product of their culture. And there's the nature versus nurture. It's both, obviously, discussion. And I've become so tuned in, aware of when I'm working with an individual, I have to first consider their cultural influence, because I recognize how much I've been influenced by cultures over the years. I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the infusion of so many different cultures that have impacted my world to give me sort of this eclectic view and perspective of the world. And also, I think as a guide and a consultant, a strategist and life coach and things like that, it's given me a better perspective to pull from. There's not much I haven't seen. And I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So how do you incorporate the cultural insights that you gather from some of these places and the people that you are working with into that branding process that you oversee and kind of guide?
A lot of times I'm working with organizations that are, even something like a major fashion label that's trying to use the right designs on their blankets. That happened. And I thought, oh, well, I'll set you up with my Lakota elder that can help with appropriation of those designs. It's a cultural element that takes a product and makes it kind of shady and exploitative, or it makes it in line with the culture. I can help with the latter. And that's, so that's been there's a constant sort of appropriation of cultures and stuff that I'm working with, because I work with a lot of indigenous elders. And we're looking at, how do we, rather than just jamming that into a situation where it doesn't quite fit and could cause confusion and even detriment to the tribe or the people, how do we do this in a way that's honoring to the culture? And a lot of times that ends up infecting, if you will, or affecting the product itself or the brand itself or whatever. And I get to see something beautiful happen there, where they've been affected by their their desire to honor a particular culture, and then I help bridge them into it, and then consequently it affects what they're doing in a very positive way and gives them, I think, a richer kind of experience as then it does then trickle down to the, the buyer or whatever down the road. I think there's something special and magical that's available to us there if we are willing to be vulnerable enough to ask, how do we weave in with your culture rather than annihilate it? And then also, how do we then take that and make it part of the internal culture here that we have, not their culture, but the honoring of that culture becomes part of this culture at a brand.
I think you may have sort of answered this question, but I wanted to maybe get to you arrive. What's the first thing a brand should do when entering a new culture, in your opinion?
The first thing I thought of was listen. You can't really overstate that. I mean, it's to listen and to genuinely listen and to be vulnerable in that listening and open and to recognize that we all come in with sort of our preconceived notions or ideas about something. But whatever it is that we're set off to do is going to be better served by us laying those things down before we walk in the room. I have walked into many situations around the world, in some very, very, very overt, intense indigenous kinds of situations around the world, where I've learned to just kind of empty my mind of expectations before I get there and simply walk in and receive, and to walk in with the posture of I'm here to receive. That's a different posture than we're doing a business deal, or I'm trying to figure this thing out so that I can finish this business deal, or what. There's just a different kind of, you're going to come in with lots of questions that you think you need to ask that are going to be super strategic or whatever. And often that's not the case. Simply listening and being in a posture of vulnerability and listening is the best policy, I think, to get the best out of that experience and then be able to, transfer that over to whatever it is you are trying to create.
I love that. Listening. What a powerful tool.
Yeah. Can't be,
be humble and listen.
It's highly underrated. Yeah.
Yeah, agree. So I want to know more about the Human Space Program. What is the Human Space Program?
Well, it started off with, there's a man, Frank White, this guy that created the concept of the overview effect in the mid 70s. And he originally started kind of coining this experience that astronauts were having at looking back at the Earth from space, from orbit. And there's something specific about that, even, from what we call lower Earth orbit, LEO, all the way out to the moon. There's a spectrum in there that says if you're looking at the Earth from that place, any further, it starts to dissipate. But in that space there, we see this blue marble suspended in space. We've all seen the photo. Actually, the guy that took that photo just passed about 2 weeks ago. But that photo, that iconic blue marble photo, along with the Earthrise photo that they took from the moon, both were during the Apollo missions. And we see the moon, and then the Earth in the background coming up. Those changed our perspective forever. From that, we saw the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, came up from that. Sierra Club came up from that time, and a bunch of other big organizations to protect the planet, because they saw the fragility and the beauty of our planet suspended very vulnerably in the blackness of space. And there's one of my friends, she's an astronaut, Nicole Stott, she says that I made a poster out of this quote that she did, but she said the only border that matters is that thin blue line around the Earth that, that protects us all. And it is thin and unnoticeable. I mean, I've talked to tons and tons of astronauts, and I've had the privilege of training many of the astronauts on their preparation and integration work when they come back. And they have all noted that you don't know when you're in space or not. There's no line, there's no border there. It's so quick, and then you're just out of it. 1 second you're not floating, and the next second you are. So with that understanding, and with Frank having interviewed more astronauts than anybody else in the world, he has had a desire since the 70s to create a blueprint for how we go to space, because how we go there matters. I'm an activist. I've been an activist my whole life, since 17 years old, working for American Indian Movement and so on. I'm still working in that space. I came into this saying, look, we're going to space. No one's stopping that train. It's not going to stop. We're not just going to decide not to go. uh, we're not going to stop innovating and getting off the planet and going into new realms and things. That's what we do. It's in our genes. Um, knowing that, and knowing that these folks are designing our future, I would like to have a say in that. And I'd like to make sure that BIPOC voices have a say in that. And I'm bringing indigenous folks into that discussion. I want to make sure that we're part of that. We can, as activists, sit over here and throw stones at Musk and in the space world if we want, but that doesn't really do any good. So Human Space Program and a lot of other initiatives I'm involved with have been about saying, let's just come over to the other side of the fence and let's all just have a better conversation rather than us just sitting here throwing stones. And then ultimately it's about creating a more inclusive, sustainable, ethical future for all of us as it pertains to, us migrating off the planet. I could go on, but that's the gist of it.
I love it. No, I love hearing more about your background working with astronauts. I mean, that's so interesting. And that quote is just phenomenal about the only border that matters.
Yes,
I mean,
I love that. That's why
really
I've made a poster out of it. I was like, oh my God, Nicole, I'm putting this up.
That's wonderful. So getting now gently into the positioning of brands. So how do you position a brand when the mission seems maybe distant or abstract? How do you go about that?
I'm asking anybody that I'm working with, once we kind of get into the system and I'm getting ready to get deep, we start getting into the discussion of what are you committed to cause? You've set out to do something. I mean, even a candy bar company, they've got they've set out to do something. There's some mission there, I'm typically working with people that have some sort of meaningful, cause behind it. And even when, working with NASA and Blue Origin and SpaceX and things, there's some sort of cause that they've united themselves together to create or to cause this thing. I say, okay, let's start there. What is that? Let's get clear on that. Typically then we know then there is a group of people that's going to resonate with if we do this properly. So I'm looking at what are you committed to cause, and then looking at people that care about that cause, and the people, your target audience are the people, typically, just as a general rule, that's the people that care most about what you've created and are willing to pay for it. That's typically your audience, but they have to care. I am a serious Seth Godin fan. I just found out my brother's interviewing him next week, which is super cool. um, I was definitely fanning out this morning, like, oh my God. Um, he's actually interviewed him before. My dad worked with him too. I'm just such a fan. But anyway, Seth says, I do business that matters for people that care. And I think it's such a beautiful way of articulating certainly how he shows up to business, and hopefully I think how I do too. But I think that, it transfers over to anyone that I'm working with. Is who really cares about what you're doing? We're creating this for them. So I want to know, what do they fear most? What do they love most? What do they care about most? That's their motivation. If it's someone I'm trying to serve, or if it's an opponent, either one, or my child, anybody, I want to know what they're motivated by. What compels them? What is it that they're waking up at night thinking about, or whatever it is? So understanding what it is that this potential group of people out here that would be your customers or audience or whatever, I want to understand what it is that what are they motivated by the most? And then looking at your cause and saying, okay, now we need to bridge those two worlds together and create a language that they can understand, that resonates with them. My job as a brand architect is to help create resonance between these two groups. If there's a resonance there, I know then we've got somebody that's listening, and then you don't have to work so hard to sell. Your marketing, if you find your marketing is arduous and ineffective, I'm going to say maybe it's your marketing, maybe it's the fact that your brand is out of alignment, And no matter what you do to market, it's not going to work because you haven't created resonance through your brand before you went out and started to market it. So you're marketing something that isn't going to sell to your audience.
This is like branding for causes or change makers 101 with you. So I'm really enjoying this.
Yeah.
I have to say, but before I ask you the next question, we went through this whole process. We launched a new website and modernizing things. We were on this old version of Squarespace that was on its last leg and not optimized for mobile. And so it was time to revamp the website, but it caused us to do some deeper internal work. Like, who are we? What are we here to do?
Yeah.
We want to have a positive impact. It was really healthy, not easy, I will say, but healthy work that we did. I was curious for you and what the work that you do. How does your team, or how do you target and approach potential partners to join the mission, or to hire you to support their mission development? I'm curious, how do you go about looking for clients, getting the right alignment there?
It's a lot. The first thing I thought of when you said that was slowly. I go into those things slowly, and very thoughtfully. When it comes to partnerships and collaborations, that's on that end of the stick. I go in slow and cautious and small, and like, let's dance a little bit together. Let's do something small together. Let's see where that leads us. I don't want to sign a 15-year contract. Like, let's do a 15-day agreement and start dancing together a little bit and see how things unfold. We don't need to rush to the plate. There's no need for that. It doesn't usually serve us well. Interestingly, even with clients, I sort of approach it that way. It's rare that someone comes kind of into my world that isn't a fit, but I am still watching out for that. And I had one a couple of months ago, first time in a while, actually, that came in, and it was someone that I didn't know, and there wasn't really any real connection. And it was very clear, right, like mid proposal, I said, wait a minute, you know what? I don't even think this is a good fit. And they said something like, can you sell me on this a little bit more? And I said, we're not starting off on the right foot. I've never sold anything to anybody. I was like, if this resonates with you and it's exciting, and there's something about me that you feel is uniquely valuable to you, let's do this. If that's not the case, and you're not just over the moon with that, it's probably not a good idea for us to even do this. We can hang out if you want, but I don't feel like doing business. And I'm not so desperate that I need to get, your business. So I am cautious about all ends of that spectrum, about bringing someone into the fold. With team, when I had my creative agency in Nairobi, I had a collective there. So there's a lot of people in and out of there. And it was a major agency that I ran for 7 years. Everyone that came in had a 3-month probation period. So if we're going to dance for 3 months, and after 3 months, if you like working with us and we like you working with us, then we'll sign a contract. But the first contract is for 3 months. And I did that process over. I don't do that so formally now, but I do it sort of informally now. So I don't know. Yeah, if that answers your question, but it's a very thoughtful, I don't ever want desperate energy in there. Even in the times when I have been really needing the client or whatever, I am very intentional about not going into anything with desperate energy, because you're not likely to get great results for anyone involved, really.
I love that. No, that's law of energy there, is it not? I mean,
yeah.
And I know sometimes dating, for example, romantic dating, you're supposed to exude, I don't know, confidence, not really, with that desperation that you're talking about, that helps grease the wheels for potential connection. Not that I'm saying you should ever fake that, but I can see how desperation can not just be a turnoff, but it's not the right initial step or energetic kind of like
Yeah.
entry point, I guess I
It's
could
not
say.
strategic footing. I'm a big student of Sun Tzu and the Art of War and so on, and it's not wise. And again, that's not an opponent or war. I mean, if anybody that studied the Art of War enough knows that it's about not creating war, about creating harmony rather than war. Uh, yeah. So I'm always thinking like, what's the best strategy here to get the best result? I mean, I have 4 kids, so I'm thinking about, with my kids, what's the best strategy here? I want to make sure I'm coming off of the right footing. And typically that means I want to come into it very intentionally, thoughtfully, cautiously, with the best energy that I can bring to the table. Because otherwise we're all starting off in the wrong direction.
Turning our attention to branding a little bit.
Yeah.
Curious, how do you help nonprofits develop a compelling and authentic brand identity?
The first thought on that is that nonprofits especially have to be extraordinary storytellers. And we talk about branding, and there's, if I say branding and storytelling, that seems congruous. People are like, yeah, that makes sense. But for a nonprofit, it's really, really important. You've got to be a great storyteller, and you've got to be good at, you have to do the work to unearth the essence of what it is that you're actually doing. And that's hard for a lot of nonprofits, I think, in my experience, to really understand, okay, we want to do this. And it's like, 15 pages later, I'm like, all right, so what is it that you're really doing? um, and so understanding the essence of what, and I'll just move into what I would normally ask and say, okay, great. You just told me all these things you're going to do. That's wonderful. What does it make possible? I think the role of a nonprofit is to paint a better picture of what could be. Even I work a lot in environmental space, and I feel like we have dropped the ball as an environmental movement in painting a better picture of what could be. It's like, okay, great. You tell me I got to do all these things. I know, I've studied human behavior my whole life. People are not going to be compelled to change by that information that you just threw at them to make them feel guilty. That's not how we change. We change because we're inspired, typically. I like, I'm going to go out and do that, get that job interview tomorrow because I watched Rocky last night. It's like, just like we're inspired. Um, that's important. So I think people have to be inspirational storytellers and understand how to get the essence of who it is that you are and what it is that you're doing is going to make possible. What does it make possible is an important question to ask as you're formulating that story of who you are and your brand identity. And then I think you have to bring people into the fold. They have to be able to come into the mix and feel that they're part of something. So then I'm asking a client, so what, if I'm part of your brand, what have I become a part of? What am I going to tell my friends that I'm a part of when I'm not in your presence? I'm going to go home and I'm going to sit at the coffee shop or whatever, and I'm going to say, I'm a part of this amazing thing. You need to give them the tools, even the words. That's most of what I do is writing, so you need to give them the words that they can use, because that's a tool that you just gave them to be an evangelist for your cause. If you don't give them a good tool in the form of like a 5-word sentence about what it is, then you've sort of failed in an opportunity there, because these people want to talk about you. They want to talk about this thing they're part of, and they want to be a storyteller. They're going to feel good about telling that storytelling, or that story, if they can articulate the essence of what it is, and then give someone then you get into like CTAs, which are call to action, things like that. But there's some practical, tactical stuff on the other end. But it's like with a website, you got like a half a second to get somebody's attention, but it's about getting their attention and holding it. It's called captivating. You have to captivate them, get their attention and hold it. But then if you haven't compelled them to act, who cares? Because you had a cause to contribute to, and if they didn't act, it didn't work. So we have to understand it's these elements of people being involved and feeling like they're really part of something, and that they have the ability to tell the story clearly because you've facilitated that, and you've given them a few buzzwords and phrases that are tools that they can use to evangelize for your cause.
How do you use digital and interactive media to enhance the branding for nonprofits?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's not like we have a choice. That's what people are using. Like they're on social media. Yeah. So I don't know that I would directly go out there and say, "Oh, this is the way to do it," except that now this is the way to do it because that's how people are receiving information. So knowing that, um, then it's like, okay, so cool. How do you make this authentic? How do you make this you? And this is a practical thing that I deal with every day with clients. How do you make this authentically you? What is it that even when it comes to doing a video or something, like somebody can present like, oh, I saw this guy that did this video this way, I'm going to do that too. And I'm like, that's not going to sell to your audience because you're not that guy and that's not your culture. You mentioned culture before. So that's not the culture. That's going to feel out of place. It's going to feel unauthentic. It's not even going to feel good to you. And people are going to sense that when they're watching your video. So we have to figure out again, like what's going to create resonance there, or what feels resonant to both sides. And there are different approaches for everybody, and there should be because we're all different humans. um, so it's really about what's most authentic. And then we said, before, you have to have a compelling story to tell. At that point, we're just storytelling through this social media platform. Now, there are some very important practical aspects of that in terms of time. How long is the video and how long is the how much of the video are you spending talking about getting up to the point versus just getting to the point? There's little things like that. It's like, I want to people, if you expect something to go or hope that something goes viral or everybody talks about it, I hope it goes viral or whatever, the chances of that are slim, but you can do some things to help out in that category. And it's about, if I watch a quick video on YouTube or on like a YouTube short or an Instagram story or something, there's no way I'm going to forward that to someone else unless I got a little thing out of it that went, oh my God. I have to have a oh my God moment or something like that. Or like I have to see a tool here that feels really valuable to me for me to care about sending it to the next person. And I know that in my world of marketing and media, sometimes I won't waste 60 seconds on somebody's video if I get 3 seconds in and realize they're not going to give me a tool I can forward to someone else. It's a weird, dynamic, but I have to tune into that in my own world to recognize I'm not the only one feeling that way. We're looking for things that serve us, but we also want something that's so good that we can share it. Because there's another thing that happens for us when we share it, and we've had a connection with a friend, and it's part of how we do social media subconsciously. So those things are important. I mean, again, on that one, I could go into a lot, but there's the short version.
Well, you mentioned Seth Godin earlier. I read Purple Cow. I love that book so much.
Okay.
And, one of the terms he uses, sneezers,
Yeah.
right?
Spreading the virus.
Spread the virus. Yeah. I mean, virality. So I guess the follow-up I'd say is like, so it's, virality doesn't necessarily, if it's so rare, it can't be the only standard or measure of success. So how would you measure success of a branding campaign for a nonprofit organization?
There's always a few different metrics there. One is there's usually a direct ask, and we're trying to raise $50,000 or $100,000, whatever, and you can see whether or not you did or not. So that that's one very obvious one. The other that's harder to measure is the impact that it may have made, and there are various levels of that. I don't know if levels the right word, just like different dynamics of that. One thing that we can look at is how much can we at least track that people are sharing that idea. So if it's being shared widely, we created resonance, we know that. And we created something that was compelling enough to where we understand that they felt that it was valuable enough to where they would feel good about sharing it. And people don't share stuff they're not going to feel like, oh man, they're going to really appreciate that I shared that with them. A lot of times people get caught up in this one campaign that they did to see, did this make an impact? And we're going to do, 6 campaigns this year for different things. And it's tempting to want to sort of look at each one of those individual campaigns and see how much did this work? How much did this work? And there's importance, to doing some of that for sure. However, the better read, the more effective read on that is, okay, after a year, where are we at? with these different campaigns and looking at these different ways that people responded to them. That's going to be real usable data at that point. And there, Seth Godin, speaking of Seth, the holy grail of marketing and branding in my world, he talks about your minimum viable audience, your MVA. Not something we typically talk about, but he's like, how many people do you need to really make this thing work that you want to work? Whatever it is, like if you're selling shoes, or if you're selling a retreat, or if you're selling a coaching services, doesn't matter. It's like, what's the number you need to make, what's the lifestyle you want to live with it, and then say, okay, in order to do that, I need this audience. It's probably not 1 million people. It might be 500 people. It might be 1,000 people. Just focus on those people. And I know then that I can answer your question better. Say, if we're just focusing on those people, then I can see in that group of people, I'm just looking at that group to see, did I make a difference there? That's different than, did I get 1 million likes or something on Instagram? It's not the same conversation at that point. So I think it's, being clear about your audience and who you need and how many even that you need to make it work, and to be clear about what it is that actually works. That's also important. So, and then you can get a better read on how effective it is with those people.
This is great. I've really enjoyed this. The last question we ask all our guests is going to ask you, what's your next chapter? What are you getting into? What's next for your career?
You're catching me at a good time. I am so excited right now. I've actually just launched my own company for the first time in years. I've been building companies with other people for years and years and years. But I just launched a new company. It's called passagecollective.com, or that's the URL. And it's sort of stewarding the transformation process and working with people. I've worked with people going through psychotherapy and other sort of things, all the way to people that have gone through great loss, a loss of a parent or a loved one or whatever. And then I've worked with astronauts and coming back from space. How do I integrate this into my life so that it shows up in my relationships and in my work and in my general experience of life? Because, it's like, I've done this and this and this, but something's not working. I'm not quite there yet. So I'm working with some amazing elders, and we have a large alliance of people that we're working with as advisors and things like that are helping us create these programs and experiences, even excursions, going out with indigenous folks and things like that, and having these transformative experiences, but taking all of the tools and processes and systems that I've used in the branding world into this world of transformation and saying it works here too. If you have a template, if you have a process and a system, we can help steward this process so that you can really get the most out of what's just happened to you. And in some cases, when they're going to have an experience, we can help prep them better as well. That's what I did with the astronauts, to prepare them for the best experience that they could have cognitively after just being blasted off the planet on the tip of a controlled bomb. And they can be zenned out, in their 4 minutes in space, and get the most out of the overview effect, and then come back. And I spend 2 months with them, helping them integrate it into their world. And I'm at that point training them to integrate. So I'm getting to do lots of fun stuff through Passage that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and some executive coaching stuff that I'm bringing in. And we're working with some great humans in there and getting to do some really fun stuff. And I'm super excited about that. So that's passagecollective.com. That's my next chapter.
Fantastic. This has been such a joy. Way too short. I'd love to have you back again sometime.
Excellent.
Maybe after you've had Passage Collective kind of grow, and we could check back in with you. But this is really enjoyable. You are atypical. You're not a normal dude, and I mean that with great praise and a full compliment.
Thank you.
And I aspire to, I'm a bit of as we talked about, like, world traveler or a citizen of the globe myself. So, and it really wasn't until I came to San Francisco and kind of got involved in tech that I started seeing the light of building business, being an entrepreneur, and really not feeling like I have to be tethered to a particular city or country or what have you. I mean, it's a global world now. You can build business anywhere, and the same is true for the staff at Next Chapter. Everyone's scattered all over the country, and I try to lead by example and say, sure, you can stay in DC where I'm from, or you can move somewhere else and still, do great work with us, hopefully. So you're an inspiration, and this has been really good. I myself will be listening back to this, I know, in the future once we get it all edited and produced. So just to wrap it up, thank you for listening to this episode of Your Next Chapter. I'm your host, JT. Our executive producer is Nick Kastner. This is edited by Justin Cortese, and we drop episodes bi-weekly. Please follow the show. And thanks for listening. Thanks for your time, Jared.
Thank you, brother.